Welcome to Mix Understood, where we talk about identity, the meaning of the word race, and explore the multicultural and multiracial experience through personal stories, candid conversations, and expert insights. I'm your host, Hannah Lee. Thank you so much for being here. Remember when we talked about raising mixed kids and the power of using books to navigate those important conversations about race and identity with them? Well, today we're continuing that conversation with Shola Oz, the author of the children's book, I Am Whole. Growing up as a first-generation immigrant in the bustling and diverse city of London, Shola learned early on to embrace and celebrate people from all walks of life. Shola's not just your average author. Nope, she's got a background in law, bringing a whole new perspective of equity and awareness to the way we can teach mixed children to fully embrace who they are. Inspired by raising her own multicultural and mixed-race daughter, I Am Whole aims to take away the focus on color and identification with one culture over another by focusing on language, family, and traditions. So join us as we dive into Shola's personal journey and the heartwarming stories from her mixed family.
So if I mention being caramel, then I'm singling out the mixed race children that are very, very light and the mixed race children that are also very, very dark. You just kind of pigeonhole mix into being this one shade of brown. And my daughter as well did not fit into that shade of brown. She's very light. So I was like, okay, don't mention colour. Don't actually mention the mixes. I can only imagine how many Thai homes, I'm there in a framed photo on someone's TV. Like that time I met Beyonce.
Before we start, it's important to say that Mix Understood is a space where stories, ideas, and research are shared for your consideration, but it's for you to shape your opinions in light of your own knowledge and experience. My hope is to explore, learn, and grow together with you. I don't claim to have all the answers. My aim is to start conversations around these topics. Welcome, Shola!
Well, now that is an intro.
Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
It's late there. You're in London. I'm in LA. The babies are in bed.
They are. And I had to make sure they were solidly asleep because my daughter will come in and say, "What are you doing? Who is that? Can I join? I'll be quiet." And I'm like, no, I need you out of here. So...
Oh, that is so cute.
It's well into bedtime, yeah.
So now that the kids are asleep, I'm just curious, it's the end of the day in London on an average day in the week or weekend. I hear that you have, I don't know, maybe we'll call it an addiction or a hobby?
Yeah. Is it my love of horror?
Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's been a long time. I think it must have started in school when, I don't know if you did it over there, but especially you grew up in Israel, so maybe you didn't, but Bloody Mary in the mirror. Did you ever do that? Or you had to say it?
What is that?
You have to say Bloody Mary. I think she was one of Henry VIII's wives. And you had to say her name in a dark room. You turn the light off. You say Bloody Mary 5 times. And when you turn the lights back on, she turns up. But I was always too scared. I said it 3 times and I had to stop. Then there's always a rumour in another school of another girl who did it and died. And you're like, oh, I don't want to be like that made up girl in that made up school. It's just, I think it started from there, the love of the fear. And I'm like, okay, let's explore this.
Man, I'm such a scaredy cat. I can't do horror.
You should see it when we choose a movie, because I write down everything I've watched. I don't know what that's about. I've been doing it for a couple of years now on my iPhone, and I have a section. I'm like, movies in 2024. It's like movies I watched alone, movies I watched with my husband, shows I watched alone. I don't know why I have to document it. It's because I take in so much. It's easy for me to forget. So when someone's like, hey, have you seen so-and-so? I'm like, let me quickly check my notes app. I'm like, yeah, I saw it. I said it was 3 out of 5 stars.
So you're getting a PhD in horror?
I know. You know what? One of my passion projects, if I had the time, it would be to have a YouTube channel reviewing movies. Because I go cinema almost weekly. So
I feel like you could totally do that. Okay, let's handshake.
You handshake. That'll be the worst edited videos.
Nobody cares.
But if I had, it's really one of my passion projects to just review films. I'd love to do that. Who knows?
Well, okay. Well, keep us posted.
Yeah.
So while you're watching films, you might be noshing on ... some Thai food.
Yes. You know what? Thai food is so hit or miss in London. I swear, honestly, it can really let you down. My go-to is I have this thing where when I try a new Thai restaurant, I have to get the exact same dish every time, because if they've got my dish right, then I can try out other things on the menu. So my go-to is green chicken curry. So if they can't get the green chicken curry right, I know I can't trust the rest of the menu, because that's like a national dish of Thailand. So I'm like, if you can't get the curry right, then I can't even imagine what you're doing to the beef and the duck and all of that. So that's like my litmus test. I'm like, how well did they do the green chicken curry before I know if this is somewhere where I can like try out other menu items. But there's just something about Thai food that I absolutely love. It's spicy, it's fragrant, it's coconutty, and I don't even like coconuts, but somehow they figured out how to make coconuts delicious. And it's just, there's just something about Thai food that I absolutely love.
My favorite dessert is mango sticky rice.
Oh, really?
I love it. I mean, mango is one of my favorite fruit, and it's a simple dessert, but it's just so good. It's so satisfying. Okay, so we know a little bit about Shola, getting some sort of a picture forming here. You have one more fun fact for us.
Yes, it's like an embarrassing fact, because I'm very much a people person. It's like, I don't know, I can't explain it. I'm definitely extroverted. Not that in the sense that I'm like going to do a flash dance, like in a flash mob, even though we did dance to Thriller at the wedding. That was a surprise, but yeah, we do. But I just remember this time in school. So I was about 13 or 14, and I went to a performing arts school. So we had a talent show and we had to sing. So I'll know my age because it was the year Lady Marmalade came out with, Missy Elliott, Maya,
yes,
Christina Aguilera and Pink. And I was like, oh my gosh, guys, I can't believe we're going to sing this for the talent show. So guess who I was? Bear in mind, I can't really sing.
Christina Aguilera,
yes,
then.
I had to, I chose the hardest vocals with the highest of notes, and I was like, the sashaying of the hips, and I was like, I'll do Christina, and everyone's like, are you sure? And I'm like, absolutely. They're like, are you sure, Christina? I was yes, definitely Christina Aguilera. That okay. And then we were practicing behind the scenes. I just wish someone had a camera so that I could have seen what we were doing backstage. So we practiced, and I remember we had to go up on stage, and the music started, so just like, hey, you go my soul sisters, or however it begins.
Go my soul sisters. I love that song. Yeah,
it's PTSD now.
Yeah,
everyone else is like, wow, what a great song, and I'm like, oh, the song that ruined everything. And when it was my turn, when it was Christina's turn, it felt like every movie I've seen where like you could see a bead of sweat from my forehead down to my chin, and I was like, I can't do this. Everyone's like, come on, Shola, you can do it. Well, they weren't Americans, so they didn't say it like that, but they said like, come on. And they were like, Shola, clapping. And I was like, oh my God, this is making it worse.
Wait, was this a cappella? I'm confused. You froze and then the audience was trying to get you to sing?
Yeah. So we only had the instrumental and everyone was singing to the actual song. But when it was Christina's part and it was my part, I was like, oh no, I can't actually do this. And I was like, I'm sorry, guys. And I just ran off the stage. The crowd was still clapping. And they kept clapping, thinking I was coming back.
I'm going to have nightmares over this story.
I do. I feel like everyone was still in the room. I'm like, oh my God, did you remember that? It's like a core memory for me, because I was like, I can't do this. And then I ran off.
Oh my gosh. Did you come back out?
No, I literally, I did not see. I don't know what happened after that. I left those girls hanging. That's how I knew I could never be in a girl band, because it was every man for themselves. I did not take one for the team. I was like, I'm out. It was I in team that day. It really was.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is a really, really difficult memory to yeah. So, I mean, you know what they say. You got to call up your girls and not necessarily those ones, but new girls, and you got to do take two.
Yeah, I know my role was very much Missy Elliott. Just do the little intro,
Yeah.
But I was like, no, I want to be remembered. Now look, I was remembered.
Oh, I'm glad you can laugh about it now. We all have those cringe moments.
What's
Oh
yours?
my gosh. I have so many, but I mean, because I've been a dancer my whole life and I'm a performer, I've had a lot of mess ups on stage. Not, I think, on that scale,
Yeah.
maybe, but I've had, this is just a quick one, but I remember, I think I was around 5 years old. I had one of my first big performances, and we were a bunch of little girls on stage, and the teacher was yelling out instructions to us, like, now you're butterflies. And then we would all improvise being butterflies, and now you're trees in the wind. And, and I felt like I was the best of all the girls, and I was really killing it. And then she said, and now you're dancers. And I thought that was such a weird suggestion to give us because we were already dancers. And I thought it was really stupid that I'm now going to pretend that I'm a dancer. And so I just stopped and I stood there like all still while all the other girls twirled and pretended to be ballerinas. But I remember as a little kid, I was so embarrassed and humiliated that I couldn't deliver the goods.
Yeah.
Because I just stood there. And that's being 5, but it stayed with me all those years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you have written a book, a really beautiful children's book.
Thank you.
And where did this come from?
So I think it's like everyone else that just got kind of like, there were kind of like 2 modes in the pandemic. It either brought something out of you that you didn't know was there, or it kind of pulled you into like a depression you didn't know was there. So for me, I never planned on writing a book. It wasn't even in my purview. I was just like, but something kept kind of gnawing at me like, okay. I'd go to sleep and I'd wake up and I'd have a couple of lines of a book, of something that rhymed. So I was like, okay. And I'd write it down in my notes app and I'd go back to bed. And that kept happening. And I didn't tell anyone about it. I just wrote it down, went back to bed. I was like, not entirely sure what this means. And then eventually that kept happening until I had what formed I Am Whole, and it was a book. And I eventually spoke to my husband. I was like, I think I've written a book. He's like, what? And I was like, yeah. I was buying a lot of books for my daughter because she is mixed race. My husband is English and Italian, and I myself am Nigerian, British Nigerian. And I was buying a lot of books for her, and I just wasn't really satisfied with what I was reading, in terms of a lot of mixed books kind of started with children kind of almost hating that they were mixed, or hating that they were so different, and complaining. And then eventually they'd have a long conversation with their family members, usually the mum, and she would console them and say, hey, it's fine, you'll be fine, best of both worlds, the end. And the kid would be like, oh, amazing. And I was like, I didn't want to have a book where the child hated being mixed. I didn't want to start a book like that, because I remember I was reading a book to my daughter and she's like, oh, why is the boy screaming and shouting? And she couldn't read at the time. But the boy was screaming and shouting because he wanted to look like his mum, who was white with blonde hair and blue eyes. And he was so upset about it. So I changed the book and said, oh, he's screaming and shouting because he hurt himself. And I was like, why am I doing this in a book that I bought for you to eventually end up reading to yourself? So it was more so me finding something where I was like, okay, what can I read? What can I show her? Which is, you are mixed. You're not aware of it now, but you will be in the future, that you are different. And there wasn't really anything specific. So I was like, let me write it. And I guess this subconscious must have manifested its way into waking me up every night, because I eventually ended up writing the book that I have now. And even when I think back on it, I'm like, wow, that was so random, because people are like, oh, write another one. And I'm like, I wish I could. And I have to actively think of writing a book. It's not even writer's block, because I wasn't even writing the first time. It was just, so people are like, write a second book. And now I have a son, and I'm like, yeah, I'd love to have a book for my son, but I've been sleeping every night, and maybe it's the horror movies are kind of blocking the creativity, because now I'm having nightmares instead of dreams. But But that was kind of what spurred it on. And then I had I Am Whole, and I was so intent when I was going over it, and I was like, I think I have something here. I was like, don't mention colour, because you will single out some kids. And even if my target audience was just black and white mixed race kids, by mentioning caramel, I will single out. And caramel is a common theme when you read interracial books, especially interracial books based on black and white kids. So it's like, if I mention being caramel, then I'm singling out the mixed race children that are very, very light and the mixed race children that are also very, very dark. You just kind of pigeonhole mixed into being this one shade of brown. And my daughter as well did not fit into that shade of brown. She's very light. So I was like, okay, don't mention colour. Don't actually mention the mixes, because again, I wanted it to be relatable to everyone. So I'm guessing the parents or the guardians that are reading it to the children can say, oh, these parents come from different places and you're a mix of the different races. So that would apply to everyone. And I was really intentional about that. I was like, don't single it out. And whoever picks it up. And I think when I started getting reviews from people who didn't have children that were mixed with white and black, and said, I think one of my early reviews where the woman said she's Caucasian and her husband is Guatemalan, and they love that book. And I was like, this is it. I've made it. This is the book that has left my network. Because in all honesty, I said to my husband at the time, I was like, look, I've invested as much as I can lose in this. So if I only ever sell this book to friends and family, that's absolutely fine, because it was never supposed to be something that, it was just kind of like a passion project. I was like, we've spent what we can lose, so I won't keep thinking about it. But then when I started getting sales outside of my friends and family, I was like, whoa, I've got a sale from someone I don't know. I'm like, hey, I've got a couple more. And then now my biggest customers are in the US. I guess for obvious reasons, I think there's so much more diversity over there. But I guess I'm just really proud of where it's come from, because it was something that started off as a dream that kind of manifested into...
Literally.
Yeah, it did. Literally a dream. It was like, it started off as a dream, and I was like, okay, be proactive about this, because this is a sign. And I'm religious, so I'm like, maybe God is showing you something. So I was like, okay, let's see. You know, I've put all the money I could into it without regretting it. And I was like, yeah. And then it kind of blew up, and I was like, whoa, okay, we've got something here. So now I'm like going back to sleep and like, please let me wake up with another line for another book, but nothing yet. But I am working on it. I'll be intentional about the second one.
Wow. So how did it impact your sense of being a mother, a parent? Did it change anything in your family, in your relationship to your kids?
Yeah, I'd say, I think growing up in London, you have diverse friends and it won't be a big deal. But you do hear that common theme of, you know, not being enough of one thing and not being enough of another, or not really feeling like you fit into one box, or having to accept or embrace one race more than the other. And that might just not even be by design. It could just be because phenotypically, if you look more black, you're just accepted as a black person. If you look more white, you might be accepted more as a white person, until they find out that you're mixed. Then it's like, whoa, we didn't know there was another side to you. So it was kind of doing my research and speaking to my friends. I was intentional to speak to people that weren't my friends, just people that had grown up mixed race. I was like on social media, just kind of messaging whoever I could, saying, hey, do you have some time to talk about, I'm thinking of writing a book about this. What do you think? Because I am not my target market, in the sense that my book is written for mixed race children, but I am not mixed race. So I wouldn't know how it's received, not being who I'm designing the book for, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. You felt a little insecure around that?
Yeah, like I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. And at the time, my daughter was 3 years old, so she wasn't fully aware of what the point of this book was, just that mummy wrote a book for me. So I was like, okay, let me speak to the people that actually would be impacted and get their thoughts, and, you know, what was it like growing up mixed race, and how was that, and using that to kind of form the basis of the book. And then it made it even more important for me to be, you know, intentional about going back to what my initial aim was, which was, don't mention race, don't mention colour, just mention that it is something that you want to embrace. Don't start off with a negative of being mixed race, because if someone is already mixed race and they have negative kind of feelings associated with that, and you start off a book with that, and then although there will be a positive at the end, I was like, let's just start off on a positive read and keep it that tone all the way to the end. And I think that's why even when I came up with the title, I Am Whole, mixed race people are always talking about being half of this and half of that, but it still does make a whole. Even when you mix them together, you can't exactly separate what makes you half of this and half of that. So I think that was something where I was like, okay, I think I've got the title. Everything just seemed so, I can't explain how it happened, but it did. I get lovely messages, and I'm so glad that this passion project of mine has left my home, has now made its way into other people's.
What was it like for you when you became a mother to a mixed kid? And you're in an interracial, intercultural relationship. Like, I know London is very diverse and it's very common to probably see a family like you walking down the street. But I'm just curious how that was for you.
I'd say with my husband, initially he hadn't dated anyone black, but it wasn't really, we started our conversations with, hey, I'm black, so guess what this means? It was kind of like, okay, there may be things that happen to black people that you might not have been aware of because, one, you yourself might not be displaying those emotions or feelings towards black people, so it might be easy to kind of not acknowledge it, that it's happening to others. And, you know, that kind of leads down to like microaggressions, explaining, you know, sometimes things will happen to black people. And he was already aware, but I think having kind of like that intimate knowledge with somebody that's actually from, like, not in a documentary sense, it's like, hey, this is my real life experience. Kind of like explaining microaggressions and racism, and kind of knowing that your child might be a victim of this. And when they're telling you their experiences, it's not a time to then kind of say, oh, maybe it wasn't what you think it is, because microaggressions is such a hard thing to explain to someone that's not being affected by it without looking like it's all in your head or being gaslit into believing that, oh, maybe I just wasn't good enough for the job. And you're like, no, I have a feeling it was a lot more than just not being good for the job. I think maybe my race fell into how they wanted this like company to look. So there's lots of conversations around that. And it's always a learning curve. It's just kind of introducing him to something that he might not have been aware of, or it might not have been the forefront of his conversation, because if you don't have like a diverse network of friends, then maybe these aren't conversations that are happening regularly anyways, or it might not be something that you even consider to be a concern until someone brings it up to you and says, hey, this is happening and it's not okay. So we had some conversations around that, and he's open and he acknowledged it, and he would send me interesting facts as well that I wasn't aware of. But yeah, I'd say for the most part, in terms of race, hasn't really fallen into like a factor into getting into a relationship with him, because I think it's like what you said, growing up in London, it's very diverse. We don't really stand out. The area that I live in, there's lots of mixed race children, there's lots of mixed families, so it's not really anything to kind of point at. Maybe when we go abroad in countries where maybe they don't even have a lot of black people, that seeing a black person in a full stop is kind of a big deal, and then seeing a black person with a white person is like, whoa, what's going on here? Let's take a photo. But fortunately in London, and I think that's why I was so keen to stay, because I know London's very expensive, so you can't stay. If you can't afford to be here, you can't afford to stay. But fortunately, I'm able to have been raised in London and continue to raise my children in London, because diversity is such a big thing for me. And I don't think I can get that anywhere else in the UK like I can get in London.
So your husband is Italian. He was born in Italy?
Yeah, so his mum is English, his dad is Italian. He was born in England and then moved to Italy, and has been raised in Italy, and then came back to England, and he's been here for about 10 years now.
Oh, not that long.
No, yeah, he's got an English name, but he's got a proper Italian accent. Yeah.
So have you been to Italy as a family?
Yes, we've been a bunch, and we're going in summer. We go every year. Even before having kids, we'd always go to Italy, so that was nice. And his mum would always come here because she is English. So he'd visit his family, and his mum would always come visit us, and then she'd go back to Italy where she stays, and I think she's planning to eventually move back from Italy back to England, and just trying to decide where in England she will live. But yeah, we go Italy all the time. I don't know Italian like I'd like to. I learned Spanish in school, and Italian is really close to Spanish, so some of the words I can pick up and phrases just by context clues. But I do actively want to learn Italian, because I learned German because my ex was German, and my husband's like, okay, so you can learn German for someone else, but you can't learn Italian for me. I'm like, whoa, we are still getting to know each other.
I have to say, I am on your husband's side.
I know. The thing is, I learnt German before the pandemic. So I used to go into the office every day, 9 to 5, and I'd go and have evening lessons after work. But now if I work from home, I don't want to go to central London for 2 hours and then come back. It was just really easy being in central London and walking to your class and then just getting the train home. I will do it. I will.
You also have 2 kids now, so that's different.
Exactly. Someone tell him. Yeah, he was there.
Someone tell him.
He was involved. He know how they got here. Yeah, it's his fault. So now I've got 2 kids, and I should take the chance to go into central London once a week to learn Italian. He's like, you're gone for like 6 hours. I'm like, I'm learning Italian. He's like, I'm not convinced. You are in like a restaurant.
I have the answer for you.
You're going to say Duolingo.
I think you should... No. Oh. I think you should start watching Italian horror films.
Yes. I should. That's a good way. Yeah, I'm going to actually check that on Netflix. I never thought of Italian. You know what? Yeah, because I'm all that, foreign films are the best, and none of them are Italian. I don't even think of that. Yeah.
I know my childhood friend learned Spanish just from watching telenovelas. So it does work. You hit 2 birds with 1 stone.
There we go. I'm like, leave me alone. I'm trying to get close to your culture. Watch the kids so I can watch this show. I can do that. I can pull that off.
That's actually 3 birds with 1 stone.
See?
Because you also get a break. Yeah.
Okay, this is being recorded, so I'm going to play this section for him.
So what is it like shifting from being in London as a family and then going and being in Italy as a family?
Yeah, I'd say I feel more on display in Italy. I'm very aware that I'm Black in Italy. It's a weird way to say it, but I am aware that I'm different there in a way that I'm not aware as, like, I don't wear my race when I walk around every day in London, but in Italy I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm Black because everyone's staring, and I'm wearing jeans and a jumper like you, so what's the difference? So very much aware, and I know that when they stare at the kids, it can be out of curiosity and it can be out of, okay, but I also want to touch. And I'm like, okay, let's not. I don't know how to say it in Italian, but don't get too close because they're not pets. So I'd say in terms of like his family and stuff, they're all absolutely fine. But it's certainly when we're walking around, I do feel a bit more on display than when I'm in London. Yeah, for sure. It's not necessarily bad. It can also be like when I go traveling, when I used to go traveling alone, like especially when I was in like Thailand, they were taking pictures of me. They're like, oh my God, you look like Beyonce. I'm like, definitely not, but I'm going to let you have your photo because this is probably the closest you're going to get to Beyonce. I can only imagine how many Thai homes... I'm there in a framed photo on someone's TV. Like that time I met Beyonce. And you know what? Finally, after a while, I didn't even correct him. I'm like, yeah, come on, come get your photo. Didn't even put on an American accent or anything. I'm like, yeah, it's me. It's your girl B. And come and get your photo taken.
A lot of these things that we talk about on this podcast, obviously this podcast was created for mixed people, but a lot of it is just relevant to everyone. We're talking about humanity here. Everyone knows what it feels like to be excluded or to feel a little bit out of place or, to be judged for how they look.
Yeah, exactly. Because I actually just listened to one of your episodes when you were talking about adolescence and how you shaved your legs when you didn't need to. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, why would she do that? And I could just get it. I was like, she's desperate to fit in. But I was like, from no hair to hair when you didn't, oh gosh. I was listening
Thank you so much for bringing it up again. I thought that episode is like buried somewhere.
Oh
no,
my gosh.
You can find it, adolescence episode. Yeah, lots of weird things. Assimilation is real. We do different things, and I still do it. Obviously, it's a survival tool.
It is. It definitely is. Even outside of being mixed, I can tell you like sometimes just being Black and being in corporate, I was like, it took me so long to wear braids at work. Braids was like, oh, this is a holiday hairstyle. So I'll put my braids in, I'll go on holiday and kind of like phase them out when, you know, work is coming back. So to actually try and make something that people might not deem as professional, depending on who you're talking to, things have changed so much. I can tell you when I started my career, there's absolutely no way you would find me in braids. And that goes for afros, that goes for dreadlocks, that goes for all of that. It was just not an option for me. I was like, I work in corporate, nobody looks like this. And the last thing I want to do is, outside of standing out for my race, is to stand out also for my hair. At least I can assimilate with hair. It's easy to kind of mimic hair. Only later I was like, okay, let me wear braids and I can also look professional in braids. But like, why was I so scared of my hair? And that came with confidence, and that came with being older. But I can tell you for sure, there was no way I would ever have worn braids as my work hairstyle versus, oh, this is just something I do on holiday because it's fun to have your braids out and you can jump in the water without having to worry about doing your hair. So yeah, it's crazy, the assimilation, because I know as well mixed race children go through that. And you mentioned this on your episode as well when I was listening. And I noticed it as well with the mixed race girls in my school would always have straight hair, because a lot of the mixed race girls in my school hung out with the white girls, and the white girls of course had straight hair. So I was seeing that thinking, how come you're straightening your hair all the time? Because I know it's not naturally straight, because like I just know that, like it's obvious. And that was another thing that came up when I was having my conversation with mixed race people when I was writing the book. It's like, what did you do to try and fit in that you kind of, you'd say, you maybe not so much regret, but you're like, oh, I can't believe I actually did that. And a lot of it came with, like, you know, the hair was a big one. Wearing makeup that was a lot lighter than them. It was interesting hearing the assimilation. I knew that, and that's why with my daughter I was like, okay, if she wants her hair straight, that will be of her own doing, but I will not push having straight hair in the way that it felt kind of pushed to me, where I was like, okay, if you want to fit in with everyone, your hair needs to be straight. So with my daughter, like when she has her hair out, I'm like, oh, it's your princess hair. And that would be her natural curls, because a lot of the times her hair is in braids because it's a lot easier to manage braids. But I was like, yeah, let's have your princess hair out. And so that she feels beautiful in her hair as a natural state versus getting all the compliments once your hair has been straightened. Like, wow, you look so beautiful. Your hair should be like this all the time, which is what I felt kind of like was my upbringing, where I got a lot of compliments when I did as much as I could to kind of assimilate with the masses.
When you had straight hair, you got more compliments?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, when I'd wear my hair straight, like really straight, I had really, like, Naomi Campbell was my inspiration. So I'm like, oh, wow, this is a successful Black woman and she has always got straight hair and she looks absolutely beautiful. So let me do that. But then when I kind of like, I think the age of YouTube and it was showing you natural hairstyles and kind of like looking beautiful in your natural state, I was like, okay, let me try that. And it doesn't mean I won't ever go back to having straight hair. It just now I won't be doing it for the reasons I was doing it before. Because before it was very much, I didn't want to stand out. So how can I look like everyone else? Because I'm going to stand out anyways. But how can I not stand out for every tick box, you know? So, yeah.
Wow. There's a part in your book that says you can have curly hair or straight or anything in between. How does that line go?
Yeah, it says, my hair may be curly or straight or somewhere in between. I love it either way because it's a part of me. And that was, again, me not trying to separate mixed race kids by saying, oh, your curly, coily locks. Because I'm like, okay, but mixed kids can also have straight hair because not every mixed kid has a parent with curly hair and another parent with curly hair to make, you know. So I was intentional of including children with straight hair that are mixed, because like yourself, if you were a child reading that book, you would have read, oh, my hair may be straight or curly or somewhere in between. I love it either way because it's a part of me. I was like, okay, any child reading that, because every child either has straight hair, curly hair, or somewhere in between. So I was really intentional about being inclusive so that anyone reading this could associate to that page, because I've got it covered.
It's really beautiful to see how you've just kind of poured your own life into this book in different little moments. Not only did you write a book for your daughter, but also you changed her name at one point, right?
Yes. So I had the name Francesca picked when I was 16. Like, I had fallen in love with that name, and I fell in love with that name. There was a famous YouTuber called, famous to me, but her name was Cheska Lee, and I follow her now still. Her name is Francesca Ramsey. She used to make really funny YouTube videos, and I was like, oh my gosh, I really love this name. I'd never heard the name Francesca before. And I was like, if I have a daughter, I'm going to name her Francesca, and I wrote it in my notes, like I do, and then had a baby, and it was a girl, and my husband liked the name. So we called her Francesca, and it turns out Francesca is an Italian name. My husband is Italian, but it's also, although you don't meet too many Francescas in the UK, it's a very common name in Italy, like very. At our wedding, there were 2 or 3 other Francescas that we had to make like name plates for. Because it was just
Francesca 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, honestly, I was like, here you go, Francesca. Here you go, Francesca. Nice to meet you, Francesca. Nice to meet you. Yeah, it was a lot of Francescas that day, but when I was reading my daughter's name, my husband liked it and we went with it. But my husband is Italian. He's half Italian, but his father's Italian, meaning his surname was Italian. So when Francesca had an Italian first name and an Italian last name, just looking at it, something happened when she was like 2 or 3 years old. And I was like, you know what? Her name, although she had Nigerian middle names, it just wasn't enough for me in terms of representation because, and let's be honest, your middle names are kind of forgotten. Usually people will adopt the middle name if they want to kind of drop their last name and just kind of like go by a first name, middle name, especially if it's for like creative roles. So when I was looking at her Italian first name and Italian last name, I was like, I really didn't feel represented. And I guess obviously the decision was made partly for me because she had never asked. She'd known as Francesca the entire time, but now all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I don't like how this looks. And it's so crazy when you're like, what am I actually saying how this looks? She's not old enough to get letters. We see her passport every so often. It's not like I'm constantly writing her name down or, she has to apply for jobs or anything. So I'm like, but something kept bugging me. So I changed her name and now her name is double-barreled. It's Francesca Aramide. And Aramide is her Nigerian name that was given by my mum. And now she has 2 first names. And although it's a mouthful, it is what it is. You guys had an episode about this where you said, names were so important and why are they so important? Because although it doesn't change who you are, it does give you a lot of comfort in knowing that, yeah, this is my name and this is how I want you to address me. It kind of like when you mentioned that you added Lee to Hannah Lee when you moved to the US, because you're like, yeah, now I can adopt this because it's something I've wanted, but for some reason I didn't do it in Israel, but I definitely know I can do it in the US. And that's kind of like how I felt on behalf of like a 2 or 3 year old. And I just changed her name. My husband was fine with it. He loved the name Aramide. We didn't actually know her middle name was going to be Aramide until she was born. My mum has this thing of not telling me the names that she's going to name the children until they're born. Because my husband was like, if I had known...
Wait, I have to interject here for a second. You're talking about your mom naming your kids like this is totally like a normal thing. I've never heard of this before.
Oh, no?
No. Is this a Nigerian tradition?
Yeah, it must be. Yeah, the mother has pretty much kind of determines or tells you what your child's name is because Nigerian names all have meanings. So it wouldn't just be, oh, call her Rose because I like roses. Like you're named because of a thing, and it can be of a time of the year or something could have happened. Like there are Nigerian names that you're named because if the child was born when a grandfather dies, they get a particular name. If the child was born at the time that a grandmother died, it's all, and Nigerians as well, we have the same name for twins. We have the highest population of twins in the world. And my mother is a twin and she has...
Really?
Yeah. And particularly the Yoruba tribe, which is where I'm from, they have the highest populations of twins in the world. And my mum is a twin and we have a bunch of twins in our families and all the twins in Nigeria have the same name. So if you're a boy or a girl, you get the same name. If you're the older one, you're called Tyra. If you're the younger one, you're called Kende. And that's just it. So if I had twins, their names would be that because they are twins. So...
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
It is.
My mind is blown right now. So your mom, was she first or second?
She was second, but this is another thing when it comes to twins. And I just finished reading a book, a Nigerian book that kind of explained it. Because when I asked my mum and my aunt, I'm like, oh, who's older? I could tell who's older anyways because my aunt acts a lot older than my mum. I just feel like my mum's always asking her for, it's almost like she's seeking permission from my aunt. I'm like, you guys are like, what, 2 minutes difference? But how they say it, and I don't want to get it wrong, is they say that the second one is actually the older one because the second one tells the baby, go out into the world and tell me if it's safe for me to come out. So the second one's kind of like telling the younger one, being the bigger sibling, to say, go out into the world and tell me if it's safe for me to come out. And then the older or younger one goes out first and tells the sibling it's safe for you to come out. Yeah, it's a weird way of seeing who's older and who's younger, but
I love that. That's a very spiritual
yes
perspective.
Nigerians are very spiritual, and I already know going in if I had twins, because it's such a common thing to have twins in Nigeria. It's more uncommon to know a Nigerian and them not have any ties to a twin.
Really? Why are people so adamant about keeping those same two names? Has anyone ever tried to break free, or is it's just so strong in the culture and tradition, and I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question, because even me, I'm kind of like already going in, if I have twins, that would be their name. Like, it's just, I guess it's just like really embedded into the culture of, well, those are your twins and those are their names.
What's the meaning of those names?
Now all I know is twin one, twin two. No, I should have actually.
Okay, forget about it. It's fine. Wow. So again, it's a cultural tradition to honor your parents by letting them name your children.
Yeah, particularly the mother. They have a naming ceremony on the 7th day. So when your child is 7 days old, they get all their names. And that's exactly what happened. They just have it's a 7 day. It's kind of like the 100-day with Chinese culture.
In Judaism, it's 8 days.
Yeah. Nigerian culture, the 7th day, it's called a naming ceremony. You have everyone around. It's like a big party, and you give the child all their names, and everyone kind of says it in like a prayer format of saying every single name that they have. Every single name may not make it onto the passport, because that's where you start having, like my daughter's names on her passport have just been hyphenated 2 initials because it does not fit on the passport. But it's just...
Is it also common to have many names then in Nigeria?
Yeah. Everyone kind of gets to go and be like, oh, add John in there. I want John in there. But when it comes to like... And you're like, I can throw in John for the naming ceremony, but will that actually make it to the identification? The jury's out. But yeah, you can have a naming ceremony and have lots and lots of names.
Like, how many names are we talking about?
Well, I've seen people have like 5 or 6. Francesca doesn't have that many. She doesn't. But it's not uncommon. Yeah.
5 or 6, just the first name?
It would be the middle names that they kind of have the ceremony around. But yeah, it can be 5 or 6. It could be 9. It could be, but it's a mix because Nigerian names have such big meanings. So everyone wants to kind of throw a name in the hat and be like, what about this? But it's up to you what you actually want to do. But I chose the ones my mum picked because I knew she had those picked before.
So it's like a gift, a blessing that you are giving to this child. It's like, and you accept it.
Exactly. And I think that's I
love that.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the benefits of like, when you are mixed, imagine having that in your background and also being closely tied to another cultural thing in your background and just being able to celebrate all of it, because it's not, oh, you don't get as many names because you're half Nigerian. It's like, oh no, we're fully adopting you as a Nigerian and here are your names, regardless of what else is in the background. And likewise, if there was like an Italian equivalent, I'd be all for Francesca doing that as well, because, let's also celebrate that part, but nothing like that exists over there.
So I'm curious, what is the meaning of Aramide?
It means my people have arrived. So I think my mother named her after a child that, it's not the same name of a child that she had lost, but it was kind of like, my people have come back to me. And my daughter having that name meant like something that she has lost and someone that she has lost has come back. Not so much in reincarnation, but it's just like a beautiful way of saying my people have arrived, and that's what it means. And it's a name I've never heard of. So it wasn't a common Nigerian name for me because I'd never heard of it before. And that's when my husband was like, had I known she was going to call her Aramide, that would have been her first name, because that's such a beautiful name. But I was so Francesca obsessed the entire pregnancy. It was hard to imagine her not being Francesca once I found out it was a girl. But had I known Aramide existed, I was like, wow, that is actually a really beautiful name. It's a name that I'd never even heard of. But I think that's why as well, I was like, oh, let's add that back into the fold as being a front and center name versus being one of the middle names that you only say if you're filling out a passport application.
I love that. I love learning about Nigerian culture. And so your parents are from Nigeria. Where were you born?
I was born in Nigeria, but I came to England when I was very young. So I don't remember anything about Nigeria, and I haven't been back, which is really bad. It's very embarrassing for someone that is, I'd call myself well-traveled. And I guess a part of me why I've not been back is because I want to experience Nigeria outside of just, like, I want the tourist experience of Nigeria where you can just visit and float around and see the sights to see. But I feel like because it will be my first ever experience of Nigeria, it will be a lot of meeting people. And I'm not opposed to that, but I have a feeling that my entire trip will be meeting people I've never met before. I'm like, okay, but when will I get the tourist experience of Nigeria where I am just there to experience and have fun and be lazy and try the food and the culture? And I feel like that would be reserved for a second trip. But now that I've got children, I'm like really keen to go to Nigeria, even if it is to meet a bunch of people that I've never met, because just to like touch the soil and to smell the air and try the food, the authentic food from the country, the place it was produced. Like now I'm really, really keen. And, you know, my mum is definitely moving back there. I think a lot. Yeah, I'd say the immigrant experience, especially my mum's generation, it's very much move to a better country, create the foundations for your children so that they can thrive, and then go back, because that will always be home to them. Home to me is not Nigeria because I don't know it. I think even if I'd visited Nigeria, it still wouldn't be home to me because England is all I know. London particularly is all I know. So I think for her, she's built her life for us here, and she's in a position where she's like, okay, I can leave now. You guys are fine. I can now go back home and I don't have to worry about work and stress because I've done all of that for so long in England. Now I can just really enjoy my retirement. So I'm really, really keen to go back to Nigeria, and we're going to do it as a family. I think next year, because the flights to Nigeria are expensive. It's not expensive when you're out there, but the flights getting there is expensive. And now we have so many dependents. Like, okay, everyone needs a seat. So, yeah, it's just finding the date right. But I definitely going to Nigeria. It's one of my key places to go next. And now that my mum will have a house there, I'll go back all the time.
Wow. Well, listen, this has been so wonderful talking to you, getting to know you and hear all about your family and your background and your experiences. So are you now actively working on book number 2?
Yeah, exactly. And now I have a son. So when I wrote the book, I had my daughter, and now I have a son, and I'm like, whoa, I definitely want him, because I want to avoid, oh, how come she has a book and not me? And I'm like, oh, the inspiration never came. Now I'm being more intentional about it, and I understand writer's block because it's a real thing for someone that is not a writer. But it's just trying to find, I want to keep, I think my USP is still having something that's applicable to all children. So I'm trying to keep in that theme.
I have an idea for you.
Go for it.
Do you have one already?
It's something around mixed-race children, and again, I want to keep it on the lines of like every type of mixed-race child can relate. So maybe it won't be based on, I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas at a wall and hoping something sticks. But it has to be something that can apply to all types of mixed-race children. Again, like I Am Whole.
Okay, I have an idea for you.
Okay.
Something to do just because it relates to your story again about the names. About the names and having different names in each culture. Yeah. You know, and you might have 10 names in one culture, and you might have this. You might have, you know, a mixture of names. I wonder if there's a book out there.
I love that. Yeah. I'm going to write that down. That's a really good one, because I don't know why it's come to mind now, but I remember reading something where there was an Asian woman, and she felt really discriminated when it was an application because her surname, I think it was Lee, but Li. But when she was filling out the application, it said it had to be at least 3 characters long. She's like, okay, but it can't be because my name is literally only 2 characters long. And she just couldn't get past that page. And I remember I was reading that thinking, oh my God, that's not even anything I would think of, because it's not been an issue for me. Oh, you don't have enough characters in your name, in the name that you've had your entire life. But all of a sudden this form says, yeah, that's not enough letters. So go and change it, because we're not changing this.
So I look forward to book number 2 coming out.
Yes.
Do you have any book recommendations for us, since you are an author?
I do. Okay, so there are so many fantastic books, especially written in the same theme of I am whole, which we can now embrace, because of course I can't read I am whole to my daughter and my son every single day. I actually had a time when she said, Mummy, will it hurt your feelings if I don't want to read that? I'm like, it's fine. It's fine.
That is so sweet.
She's mindful to check in. I was like, yeah, it's fine. I understand if you don't want to read I Am Whole every day. I could just imagine like how many times you've had to read this book. So I'm like, yeah, it's absolutely fine. You will not hurt my feelings. So I do teach her to respect her books. So many books in the genre of I Am Whole, and which is fantastic, because a lot of them have been written around the same time as mine, and they will be written in the future, and hopefully I can add to the I Am Whole book collection series. But I'd say some of the books I'm really keen on right now, one of them is called Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, and it's by Joanna Ho. It's a beautiful book that I bought for my friend about an Asian girl who embraces her looks, because we know when it comes to East Asians, they can face a lot of discrimination based on their eyes, and I know it comes into that whole assimilation where double eyelid surgery is the most popular type of surgery in East Asia now. So this book just embraces loving the eyes that you have, and knowing that it comes down from a long line of there's a deep lineage behind that, because the book bases the girl having eyes that are like her mother's, and the mother's having eyes that were like her grandmother's. So it goes so much further than just what you see in present day. There's a history behind it, and I just found it to be such a beautiful book. And it's called Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho. Another book that I've read, although it's not a children's book, it's a book I just finished called Wandering Souls by Cecile Pin. And just a quick overview, it's about the Vietnamese boat people and how they came from Vietnam, and they were destined for a life in the US, but they got derailed, and a lot of things happened, and they ended up in England, and it's describing their life in England and the racism that they faced and how they struggled to assimilate, and the things they did to fit in with British culture, and also that back and forth of what would have happened if we actually made it to the US. And there's a lot of loss and heartbreak. It's a beautiful book. I've just finished it. It was a very quick read, but for anyone that's in the theme of learning about books from other cultures and knowing, just kind of getting that understanding of what other races may have been through, I found that to be a really nice read. And it wasn't entirely heavy, because it ended on a light note, because a lot of these books sound very heavy and you're like, I'm not in the mind space of that type of book. But it was written well in a way that you're like, oh, okay, I actually enjoy reading this. I'm not going to bed sad every night. And I guess the last book that comes to my mind is Hair Love. It's a very popular book. I'm sure most people know about it, but in case you don't, it was written by Matthew A. Cherry, and the illustrator is Vashti Harrison. And I know the illustrator because when I was looking at I Am Whole, I saw her page and I was following her on Instagram, and I was like, oh my God, her illustrations are so beautiful. But there was no way I was even going to waste her time inquiring, like, hey, how much would you do for my book? But it was one of the inspo that I sent to my illustrator, who did a fantastic job, and said, look at this book and maybe something like this. So, and I Am Whole doesn't look like, but there are some similarities there, because I was so inspired by them. But those are a couple of books that come to mind. And of course, there are so many books, and fortunately, so many articles. So if you search multiracial books, you will find something like I Am Whole, and I'm so proud to be involved in that mix of books. So
Wow, I love all these recommendations. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check them out. I also loved your review of the books. I think you did. We should have filmed that. Well, we are filming this. We can just pop that up on YouTube, and then you can start your channel of book reviews, which would then grow into movie reviews. We have the pitch for the second book. I think there's only one thing missing to close this episode.
Is it my original song?
Yes. I'll give you the "Hey Sister," and you can come in, and we have to close this circle so that you can move on with your life. And what do you think?
This is a surefire way to ensure that you get no more listeners after this episode, because they're like, well, is she going to do that every time with her special guests? Because there's kind of nothing more cringe than, I don't know if you ever dated guys that were in the music industry or wanted to be in the music industry, and they're like, I'm going to perform this song for you. You're like, oh my God, I'm about to cringe to death. Please don't.
No pressure. I'll just give the beat, and if you want to come on, you can. If you don't, you can run off.
Okay. I'm gonna do the Mariah Carey whisper register. So if you have your headphones turned all the way up, you still won't hear it. So let's go.
Okay. Okay. Hey sister, go sister. Hey sister, duh.
I don't know the lyrics. Sabrina for the sea. Hey Joe, gotta give it a go. There we go. I did it.
Yeah. Woo.
Oh my God, the PTSD will not allow me to remember the lyrics. Hey Joe, you want to give it a go? Oh,
Jakey.
That's it. Oh my gosh.
I know. Thanks for being such a good sport. Any final words? Anything else that kind of you want to share today? How was it for you?
Oh, it was great. Hanali, thank you. It's been absolutely fantastic. You're a great host. I've binging your show, and I'm like, oh my God, I actually love listening to this, and it's hilarious, and there are just so many gems. And even, I don't know why, but you saying, the average bra size in Israel was a C and you had no boobs, and you're like, oh man, I just want boobs. It's great that you can have a safe space for people that are mixed race, but also people that like me that aren't, but to also kind of learn something and get some comedy out of it. It's absolutely fantastic. I love your podcast. You've done a great job, and I'm so grateful for you being so welcoming to me. And yeah, I could do this again.
Oh, well, yeah, let's bring you back. We're in season 2 now. I have ideas already for season 3 and 4 and 5, but one step at a time.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you, find your book?
So my book is available on Amazon, on Waterstones if you're in the UK. You can order directly through me if you want to, and that's iamwholebook@gmail.com. You can find me on pretty much all the popular social media sites for millennials, because I know there's a whole bunch out there that I've never heard of, but the Twitters, the Instagram, the TikToks, and Facebook is @iamwholebook. You can drop me an email. I'm really good at responding to my emails now. And if there's any inquiries, I do children's events where I read to schools. I love going to schools. I'm going to get more into that this year. So virtually and in person. So yeah, there's lots of places you can reach me. Just type in @iamwholebook and I'll pop up somewhere. And if you want to get to me directly, it's iamwholebook@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Yeah, so if you guys enjoyed this episode, please please follow, subscribe to this podcast if you want to get that notification that the next episode is out. You can follow us on Mixed Understood Pod on social media as well. And also, I would love to hear from you. So if you have any feedback, if listening to this conversation sparked any stories that you want to share with us, you can actually leave me a voicemail at 323-524-8662, or you can record a voice memo and send it to the email, which is mixedunderstoodpod@gmail.com. I really would love to hear from you. It's the best when we hear from the listeners because we're building this together, right? So the more, the merrier. Everybody's welcome here. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends and family. tell someone about Misunderstood Pod. And that's it. So on that note, I want to thank you, Shola Oz, again for being here today. And all the best with book number 2.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to need it. So.
Alrighty. Well, goodbye.
Bye.
This episode was produced by me, music by Matthias Kunzli.